Siboniso. Siboniso. Siboniso, can you hear me? All right, no, I'm glad you can hear me. So it's 11 past and it's only me and you in the meeting. That's sad, Siboniso. That's sad. But you know what? So we have to continue. There's three, Siboniso, guys, 20 past we start. We cannot wait for any longer because we used to wait and people don't come. At 20 past we start. Are we together, guys? There's three and Siboniso. Okay, Siboni. So yes, we'll start. This will start. We can't wait any longer. We have been waiting for quite a long time. So students must be responsible and accountable. Guys, can you see my screen? The introduction to fringe benefits. If you can see my screen, please put that in the chat. Okay, thanks, DC. Guys, it's 20 past 4. Let's start our today's topic, introduction to fringe benefit, this second part, because we did the first part where we looked at the travel allowance, how to work travel allowance calculations in terms of determining what exactly what is the gross income that must be included in an employee's gross income to determine the taxable income. Then now, the second part now, we look at the fringe benefit, because we are saying the fringe benefit is anything that is being given to an employee, not using cash payments. It can be the right of use of an asset provided by the company. So now we are going to look at the second part, of which we are going to look at the acquisition of asset at less than actual value. In fact, we have touched on this one while we were busy with part A, the right of use of any asset, right of use of motor vehicle, meals, refreshments, and meals and refreshment vouchers, residential accommodation, and again, the summary and examples of residential accommodation, deemed house loans, payment of employees' debt or release of employee and medical aid contribution. These are the things that we are going to deal with today. So, and at the end of the session, we must be able to differentiate between a travel allowance and a fringe benefit. Are we together, guys? We need to differentiate between a travel allowance and a fringe benefit. A travel allowance, an employer gives you the money as part of the monthly allowance to pursue his business. So, but in terms of fringe benefit, you are not given any cash. Rather, you are given the right of use of an asset that belongs to an employer. Let's look at the right of use of an asset. It says right of use of an asset other than residential, meaning that here we are concentrating on an asset other than residential accommodation. And it says if an employer lists an asset on behalf of an employee, then this is how it must be calculated. For example, let's look at a mining company or a construction company, whereby most of the employees are staying far from the business. Then the employer can rent a property on behalf of the employees. And because the employer lists that, the employee is entitled to pay rental to that particular third party, because he will be renting out the asset to the third party. Then it will be an agreement between the employer and the employee for how much the employer is going to pay and how much an employee is going to contribute. In this case, most of the time, the employer would say, I will contribute 70% of the rental amount, and you employees, you can contribute 30%. It will depend on the agreement between the two. It will totally depend on the agreement. So then, if they say the rental income that the employer need to pay, because that will be an expense in the hands of the employer. If it is 10 rand, then the employer says, I will pay 7 rand and the employee will pay 3 rand. Then it will be rent paid by the employer 7 rand minus amount paid by the employee, which is 3 rand. Amount that must be taxed in the employee's and it will be 3 rands. And again, it differs with an asset that is owned by the employer. Look what it says. It says use the 15% of which is a depreciation per annum multiplied by the law of market value. Then less amount paid by the employee, amount that must be taxed in an employee. So now you have to ask yourself, if an asset is owned by the employee and the employer, we know the depreciation expense, it be claimed by the employer, not the employee, because the asset belongs to the employer. Then what does it mean to say law of market value? When an asset is owned by the employer, SARS requires the taxable value of this fringe benefit to be calculated based on the 15% per annum. That 15% rate is deemed depreciation rate applied to approximate the benefit of the employee's private use. And when it says lower of the two possible values, it can be market value of the asset at the time the employee first uses it privately, or employee's cost, what the employer actually paid for the asset. This lower of rule, it prevents inflated fringe benefits if the employer overpaid or if the market value is much lower than the cost. Example would be, let's say, look at this example. Employer pays a TV for office use at 20,000 rand, but its market value when the employee uses it privately is 15,000. Then the fringe benefit will be 15% multiplied the lower of 20 and 15,000. And we know the lower between the two is 15,000. And if it is 15,000, meaning that it will be 15,000 multiplied by 15%. Is what it says. And the value of the taxable fringe benefit will be 2,250 per year. That's an example. If an asset is being owned by the employer, and it says when the employee is granted the sole right of use of an asset or a major portion of its useful price tax in employee sense. That's the issue when come to the fringe benefits. Is how you must calculate it. Then let's look at the right of use of motor vehicle for private purposes. Remember, the aim is to use the car for business. But if it's a private, that is a benefit because it was not allocated for private use, but for business. But if you use for private, meaning that that will be a benefit in the hands of an employee. You take the taxable benefit monthly, which is equals to 3.5% multiplied by the determined value. 3.5% meaning that, and you'll get this in the scenario, meaning that the car does not have maintenance plan. That's why it says 3.5%. 3.5%, guys, meaning that the car does not have maintenance plan, but you will be given a scenario, and the scenario will specifically be clear because there's a difference between 3.5% and 3.25%. The determined value, meaning the value of the vehicle. And we know at the stage that the value of the vehicle is cost including VAT, excluding finance charges. And it says you calculate the same as for travel allowance. Use the cost divided by the market value. And again, it says if employees first granted the use of vehicle for 12 months or more after employer acquired the vehicle, then reduce with the depreciation for 15% per annum for each complete year. Let's say the car was first used in 2020, 2021 to be depreciation for 15% for a complete year. 2022, it must be a completed year before a depreciation of 15% can be applied. That's the role of an asset that is being owned by the employer. Look at this. It says taxable benefit monthly, 3.5, multiplied by the determined value of the vehicle. If the vehicle given for a part of a month with no maintenance plan, use the ratio of days divided by the total number of days in that particular month. Just hear what it says, guys. Just hear what it says. It says if vehicle is given for part of a month with no maintenance plan, use ratio of days used over total days in that particular month. Can you see? Or this explain itself. So somebody, I'm sure, is having some difficulties. Let me just see who it is. And this one, log out and log in. Because, guys, can you see my slide? Can you see my slide? Guys, can you see my slide? Because I'm sharing. Guys, can you see my slide now? No, Masangani, they said L said she can see the slide. Why can't you see the slide? This is the slide. Can you see this slide? Guys, can you see this slide? Right of use of motor vehicle for private purposes. Guys, in the chat, please tell me if you can see this slide. Okay, if you can see the slides, let's continue, guys. It says right of use of motor vehicle for private purposes. Yes, why is for private purposes? Because for private purposes, that portion is fringe benefit because it must benefit an employee. Then it says when you have the right of use of motor vehicle for private purposes, how do you calculate that? It says you take the taxable benefit, which is the monthly one, multiply by 3.5%, determined by the determined value. What does it mean? Meaning that you are taking the amount of the value of the vehicle for that month, if it was used for that month, and the car does not have maintenance plan, meaning that, look at this, 3.5%, then meaning that the car does not have maintenance plan, and you'll be given this information for you to determine whether to use 3.5 or 3.25. 3.25 meaning that the car has got maintenance plan. Can you see the difference? Maintenance plan meaning that you need to use 3.25 because the car does have maintenance plan. That's the difference between the two. Then it says any amount paid by the employee to employer, reduced fringe benefit amount to be included in the employee's taxable income. I gave you an example with the manufacturing company or the construction company or the mining, of which the employer are staying far. The employees, they are staying far from their work. So the employer hire or lease the property. Then whatever the employees been paying, then we need to reduce with what the employer has paid originally. That's why it says reduce the fringe benefit with the amount paid by the employee to employer. Then, but in terms of a motor vehicle, we need to use 3.5% because the car does not have maintenance plan. And again, use 3.25 if the car does have a maintenance plan. Then it says if the given of the use or if the car is being used for primarily for business purposes, if one or more, then you tax one with the highest private use. That's the law of fringe benefit because there are some employees who use two cars for business purposes. Then the act says if an employee uses two cars for business purposes, tax the one with highest value of private use. Then you will see in a scenario which one it has got higher value of private use, then you will tax that one. Then the business use percentage reduction. What does it mean? Meaning that when an employee claim reduction in the value of fringe benefit, he must or she must keep the accurate record. That will be in the form of a logbook. Remember, you need to get the kilometers in the logbook. There's no other document that you can use to get this recording of the private and the business kilometers. It says when the issue is like this, do as follows. Calculate the ratio of business use over business use. You take the business kilometers, you divide it by the total kilometers traveled, multiply by fringe benefit. Then after that, deduct the business use from the total fringe benefit and multiply by 3.5. I said if you use 3.5, meaning that the car does not have maintenance plan, then you will see when we do an example of which it will clearly link to this practical part of it, because the practical says do the as follows. Then we need to do as follows to take the business kilometers divided by the total number of kilometers traveled, multiply by the fringe benefit, and you deduct any business usage to reduce the portion of the fringe benefit, multiply by 3.5% if the car does not have maintenance plan. Look at this, guys. Fringe benefit. Mr. X uses a company car which costs 300,000, including VAT. He traveled 24,000 kilometers in total for the year, of which 11,000 were for business purposes. The vehicle has no maintenance plan. Can you see? It says the vehicle does not have maintenance plan. Already we know how much percentage can we use if the car does not have maintenance plan. Then let me just arrange this quickly. Then the step one, it says take, this is the total fringe benefit, which is 300,000 on the value of the vehicle, multiply by 3.5. Why 3.5? Because they said the car does not have maintenance plan. Then because the car has been used for the whole year, multiply by 12 months, which is 126,000. Then deduct this from the business kilometers, where you are going to take the business ratio divided by the total number of kilometers traveled, multiplied by the value of the benefit. Is what it says. They say multiply with fringe benefit, deduct business use for total fringe benefits, multiply by 3.5 if the vehicle has no maintenance plan. Then this is the value of the fringe benefit per year. Deduct the business kilometers from the fringe benefit that was provided, of which you take the ratio of the business kilometers divided by the total number of kilometers traveled, multiply by the value of the benefit. Then you get 57,000. Then now the question is how much the value of the fringe benefit must be included in Mr. X. Then we are going to say the value of the benefit minus the business travel. This is the value of the fringe benefit. It does link well with the theory, but let me challenge you guys. If they say the vehicle has maintenance plan, meaning that we are going to use 3.25. If they are saying the car has maintenance plan, can you see? If they say the vehicle has maintenance plan, meaning that our rate will be 3.25%. But the scenario says the car does not have maintenance plan. We must just leave it as it is. Then again, there are some scenarios where an employee pays all the costs. Then if that's the case, then we need to know how to calculate that particular, the portion of the cost that the employee paid. And the employee must keep the record of those business expenditure. Then it says, when an employee bears or pays some of or all of the cost, the employee must claim the reduction in fringe benefit, of which the employee must keep accurate records of distance traveled for private purposes, because that part of private purposes, this is fringe benefit. Because the car originally it is for business purposes, but if the employer allows you to travel for business purposes with that vehicle, meaning that that portion of private is a fringe benefit. Then it says full cost or one of or more of the following must be paid by the employee: the license, insurance, maintenance, or the fuel. Then what you do, they say you take the cost The private kilometers divided by the cost multiplied by the total number of kilometers traveled. That will be the amount to reduce the fringe benefit with. You take the private kilometers divided by the cost multiplied by the total kilometers traveled. Then that amount will be reduced from the fringe benefit that is being provided by the employer. We'll look at an example. This is a summary of the previous slide. It says when an employee bears full fuel cost, reduce fringe benefit with the rate of fuel as in the travel allowance table. Therefore, it will be rate cents per kilometers multiplied by private kilometers. This is the amount to reduce the fringe benefit with. Can you see what must be paid by the employee? It can be the cost of the license, the insurance, the maintenance, or the cost of fuel. Then, before we go to an example, again, they say under the business use percentage reduction, the foreign cars are excluded as fringe benefit. Pool cars, pool cars are excluded, and I've explained last week to say pool cars, these are cars that are available to any employee within the employment. In other words, a pool car is a company vehicle that is available for use by multiple employees, not assigned to a specific employee. Remember, a fringe benefit is a car that is assigned for a specific employee. But when it comes to pool cars, then these are available for everyone. For example, let's look at the UJ as it is. It has pool cars, meaning that you will see those cars, they've got the emblem, the name of the institution. Then everybody who's working for UJ can request one of those cars. If you want to attend a meeting in another campus, you can request that car, you can drive that car. And even tomorrow, somebody can use that car if it is for business purposes. Those are pool cars. Look at the policemen. Look at the security guys. They've got pool cars, meaning that everyone who is on duty on that day can be able to drive that car, not assigned to a specific individual. And we know that travel between place of residence and a place of work is regarded as private purpose or private travel. Then again, the last one, it says required to use vehicle outside normal hours of work and private use is infrequent. What does it mean? It means if an employee must keep a company car available after hours of for work reasons, for example, emergencies, on-call duties, and only rare uses it privately, the car is not treated as a fringe benefit. That's why it says required to use vehicle outside normal hours of work. SARS considers that the main purpose is for business availability, not personal enjoyment. And another example would be, let's say a doctor is required to keep a hospital car at home to respond to emergency at night. They occasionally take the car to buy groceries because that car is for business purposes, for emergencies. Let's look at that example where I've said when an employee pays full fuel cars, how much are we going to deduct? Okay, someone is sending this up. Who's this, guys? Yes, your hands is up. Who's this? Guys, on my side, they are moving. I don't know on your side. I don't know what's happening. But on my side, they are moving. Where's that hand? Anna Marie Mulatelo Tapa said we can see the slides. So I don't know if you say they are not working on you, are not moving. On my side, I'm moving. I don't know why, guys, they are not moving on your side, and they're supposed to be moving. Or we can see the slides. Thanks, Anna Marie. And other guys, can you see my slides? Before we continue with this example, I just want to find out whether you can see the slides. Someone says we can see, someone says they cannot see them. Anna Marie, can you please log out and log in? Guys, I will stop sharing and share again. Because if you say they're not moving and on my side are moving, I don't understand. I don't know what's happening. I will stop sharing and share again and see if they're not moving. Let me just stop sharing, guys. Share. Can you see now? This is my slides. I stop sharing and share again. Guys, can you see my slides? So I'm trying to move them. Full cars. I've moved this one. I've moved this one. I've moved this one. Guys, if they are not moving on your side, can you please log out and log in again? Because I've logged out and logged in. On my side, they are moving. I don't know why they are not moving on your side. Because I can move now. I'm on this slide 8, then slide 9, slide 10, slide 11. Olebogo, please log out and log in and tell me if they are not moving. One of you log out and log in. But remember, even though they are on presentation mode, you need to see them. So you can now see 13.4.4. Oh, Dube say they are moving now. Okay. Tell me, Dube, which slide are you seeing now? Let me just put where we are. Which slide do you see now? Do we see the 13.4.5, an example? Which slide do you see? Because I'm moving the slides. You still on 13.4.4. Guys, tell me which slide do you see? Otherwise, we are not going to win this battle, because if some can see, some they don't see, I don't know. All of you guys, do you see 13.4.4? It means my slides are not moving. And one says they are moving. Then meaning that they are not moving, guys. What we are saying in the chat, meaning they are not moving. Butilo, Maubani, which slide do you see on your side? Because now mine is 30.4.5. An example. Guys, let me just try again and okay, let me just stop sharing. I've stopped sharing. You are not seeing anything, isn't it? Butilo, you're not seeing anything because I stopped sharing. Yes, let me share, Dube, and let me know which slide do you see. I'm sharing again. Share screen. Which one do you see? Masangani, which one do you see? Because when you say yes, I'm confused now. Oh, 33.4.5. Okay. Then meaning that Masangani is seeing the slide that I'm presenting right now. Is that all of you guys see the same screen? So can we continue, guys? Oh, now they are moving. Oh, thanks, Butelo. Let's continue, guys. If they are moving, then if they are not, please let me know. So we are on this example, business use percentage reduction. If we have time, I'll go back, guys, and try to summarize, because I'm sure some of you didn't see what I'm presenting. And the other thing, it will be good of you guys to come to class so that we can summarize the whole thing. But if we have got time, then I will happy to repeat from slide 1 to 10. So let's see how we can go. It says when an employee bears full fuel cost, what must we do? Because the question is calculate the value of fringe benefit. Mr. X had the private use of a car that had cost the employer 400,000, including VAT. It is not subject to business plan. Can you see? When you see this, meaning that the value of the vehicle, you are going to multiply by 3.5%. and for the whole year, because it says for the 2025 year of assessment, and we are dealing with individuals. Then it says for the 2025 year of assessment, during the whole of which Mr. X used the car. Mr. X traveled 30,000 kilometers, and his logbook showed that 20 kilometers were for private usage, and 10,000 were for business use. Mr. X paid for the fuel relating to his private use of the motor car. This amounted to 26,000 for the year. The question is, calculate the value of the fringe benefit for Mr. X. Then they said the first step, you need to take the value of the fringe benefit, of which this is the value of the car, multiply by 3.5%, meaning that the car does not have maintenance plan. It's a monthly, but we need to annualize it. Then when we annualize it, 14,000 multiplied by 12, we get 168,000. Then less business use reduction. What does it say? It says you take the amount of benefit of which we have calculated above, multiply by the ratio of business kilometers divided by the total number of kilometers traveled. Then it will give you the reduction of 56,000. But remember, in this case, an employee pays the fuel. Can you see? And if he does pay the fuel, we take the private kilometers multiplied by 197.9 cents. Why? Because they say the fuel cost was paid for his private usage. Then, meaning that we are going to take the value of the private usage, the kilometers, multiplied by 197.9. How did we get 197.9? Through our text table, the travel scale cost table. The value of the car is 400, and we know our fixed cost is 113,436. Then our fuel is 197.9. Is how we get to the figure of 197.9 cents, of which is fuel cost per cents, is cents per kilometers. This reduce the value of the fringe benefit, because originally it was 168,000. Then we need to reduce it with the business use reduction, meaning that business use deduction, you are taking the value of the fringe benefit multiplied by the ratio of business usage divided by the total number of kilometers traveled. And again, because they said Mr. X, his logbook showed that 20,000 were used for private usage, and he paid a fuel for private use. Can you see? Mr. X paid for the fuel related to the private use. Then that's why we add this line to say minus what he has paid. And there's a private use, 20 kilometers for private, multiplied by the fuel, because the fuel was 197.9 cents, which is based on the value of the vehicle. Then that's the value of the fringe benefit that must be included in Mr. X. Guys, do you understand this calculation? Do you understand this calculation? I can repeat. Do you understand on this calculation, guys? Thanks, Butsilo. Oh, thanks, Butsilo. But guys, remember, I'm still going to summarize, because I know they've got some difficulty in seeing my slides. But I have to do just this, guys. I'll go back and explain. What about the meals and refreshments? Because it says a fringe benefit arises when an employee has been provided with a meal or refreshment, either free of charge or for a consideration less than the actual value. We touched on this, and I gave an example of Mamoratua. She's selling quotas, and if the value of quota is 15 rand, her employees can get those meals and refreshment either free or for a consideration or an amount less than the actual value, meaning that if it is 15 rand, they can get it by 14 rand, meaning that 1 rand represents a fringe benefit in the hands of employees. And I spoke again with Edgar's to say, if you're not an employee for Edgar's, if the value of a trouser is 10 rands, me and you, we can buy it for 10 rand, but the employees can get it by 9 rand, which is called staff price. Most of the time, they call it staff price. Then the difference between 10 and 9, then 1 rand represents a fringe benefit because an employee of Edgar's, that employee does not pay the whole amount, because once he paid the whole amount, it's no longer a fringe benefit. Me and you, it's not a fringe benefit because we are paying the whole amount. And again, I've spoke about a loan. If sorry, Butsilo, to make this example with you, Mr. Marcela is not working for Standard Bank, but Butsilo is working for Standard Bank. So when we apply for the same amount of loan of 100,000, Mr. Marcela, because he's not an employee of Standard Bank, he can get the loan with an interest of 10%. However, Butsilo can get a loan of 100,000 with an interest of 9% or 9.5. The difference between 10% and 9.5%, of which is 0.5, represents a fringe benefit in the hands of Butsilo, because it needs to benefit Butsilo because she is an employee to Standard Bank. Then coming back to refreshments, I was just giving an example, guys. Then it says, cash equivalent, value less any consideration paid by the employee. Cash equivalent meaning the value of the quota is 15 rand. The employee paid 14 rand. 1 rand represents the value of the fringe benefit. And there are some exclusions. Say, no fringe benefit when meals or refreshments are supplied on behalf of the employer. For example, supplied by business canteen. What does it mean? Meaning that meals provided in a company canteen are not taxed as long as the canteen is run by the employer for employees. It's not like the building I at UJ canteen, but they are not owning the people who are owning those people. They are not part of the UJ staff. They are external people. That's why there's no fringe benefit, because we don't have employer-employee relationship. As students, as staff, we buy at the normal price because those shops belongs to external parties. Then supplied by employee on business property. This means if an employee brings food or refreshment into employee's premises for general consumption, this does not create any fringe benefit. For example, in the morning, I come with a bucket full of fed cooks or amagwinya. Then I'm an employee of UJ, but I'm selling them on the business property. This is not a fringe benefit. Supplied during business hours. Meals or drinks supplied as part of working hours are not treated as taxable fringe benefit. For example, employer provides juice, sandwiches at the staff training session. Employees consuming this are not taxed because it's part of work activity. What about supplied by employer on a special occasion? For example, Christmas parties, retirement recognition event. These are not taxed. As SARS treat this as a token of goodwill or appreciation rather than a remuneration. For example, employer organizes a Christmas lunch with catered meals for staff. There's no fringe benefit. Then the last one will be enjoyed by employee due to entertaining on behalf of employer. What does it mean? It means if an employee consumes food or drink while entertaining clients or performing business duties, this is not a fringe benefit. An example will be employee takes a client to lunch at a restaurant on behalf of the company. There's no fringe benefit since the meal is for business entertainment, not personal enjoyment. That's why they say this kind of meals and refreshment, they are not part of the fringe benefit. Then let me tell you before I move to the next slide. They say a fringe benefit arises when an employee has been provided with a meal or refreshment either free of charge or for a consideration less than the actual value. I want to give you this example to get it clear. Let's say they use just a way to campus, that canteen. If the employer is one who sells food, meals, or refreshment, do you know that as staff or students, we are going to get at less than the actual value? Because there is a relationship between the employer and the student and the staff. In that case, is when we can see the fringe benefit, how it arises if the business is run by the employer. Let's look. If the employer provides residential accommodation, it is residential accommodation provided to an employee either free of charge or for a consideration that is less than its rental value. I will give a quick example. Let's look at the doctors, the nurses at Baragwanath Hospital. There are some residential accommodation for emergencies. Let's say some of the doctors knock off at 12 midnight or in early hours of the morning. They can have that accommodation for a nap so that they can, in the morning, they can come quickly and to perform their duties. And in that case, the employer will enter into an agreement with the doctors or the nurses involved to say, I'm giving you this accommodation. However, you are going to pay this much or you are not going to pay anything. And if you are not paying anything, then that will be a fringe benefit. If you are not paying anything, and if you are paying portion of the total amount that need to be paid by the employer, meaning that that portion that is being paid by the employer is considered as a fringe benefit because an employee does not pay the full amount of the rental. You only pay that portion. That's why it says rental value for the year, less amount paid by the employee. And again, it says if full ownership vests in the employer, meaning that the employer owns the property and provides it to the employee. That's why I give an example of the Baragwanath Hospital, where the doctors and the nurses, they've got accommodation just inside the hospital. And again, look at the policemen. Go to Moroka police station. There are some containers. They call it barracks. Those are hired by the employer on behalf of the employee. Then the employee can enter into an agreement with the employee to say, guys, I'm leasing this property from the third party. Then what I will do is to pay a portion of the rental and you'll pay your portion. However, the portion that is being paid by the employer is a fringe benefit because as an employee, you are not paying for the full amount. That's why it says rental paid for the year, less amount paid by the employee. If there's any amount that is being paid by the employee, because in some instances, you will find that the employees get that accommodation free of charge, meaning that the employer pays the whole rental. Then it says, if full ownership does not vest in the employer, meaning that the employer does not own that particular asset or residential accommodation. And when it comes to this, it says use greater of formula or total amount paid by the employer, of which is rentals or other expenditures. Use only formula if the following requirements are satisfied. Then SARS requires the fringe benefit to be the greater of the formula value, which is based on market value, rental value, or interest rate. And again, the total amount paid by the employer that must be deducted against whatever the employer has paid. Then let's see. They say the formula value of the benefit A minus B times C over 100 times D over 12. Let's break down this formula to see what A stands for, what B stands for, what C stands for, and what D stands for. It says shifted. Then it says A's remuneration proxy, previous year's remuneration, or A will be his remuneration for that year, crossed up on a daily basis to what it would have been for a full year if the employee was only employed by his current employer or an associated institution for part of the proceeding. Guys, for you to identify A, B, C, and D in this formula, you will be given, in fact, answers on the scenario. Then you just take those answers and put according to the formula. Because A, they are telling you what is A, and B, 95,750. Can you see? It changes every year. 2024, it was 97,750, and now in the current year, it is not changed, it's still the same. Then, but be careful on the B, because it says B can be nil. In what situation? If the employer is a private company and the employee or his spouse controls the company, or is one of the person controlling the company, or has a right of option or preemption, meaning that if it's a one man's business, a sole proprietor, meaning that I'm Mr. Marcella, I'm a director of Marcella Pty. Can you see? It's a private company. I can control that company. I can make decisions on that company. Therefore, B will be nil because I've got control over that company. But if it's residential accommodation, I don't have any control, I'm just an ordinary employee, then B will be 95,750, and we are not going to give it to you. You need to know it by head. Then C, it says if the accommodation consists of a house, flat, or apartment consisting of at least 4 rooms, then C will be 17. Then what about 18? It says if such accommodation is unfinished, meaning that there's no furniture in that business, in that accommodation, you bring your own furniture, and power or fuel or electricity and water is being paid by the employer, then our rate will be 18, because it's C over 100. That is our rate, of which in that case, C represents 18. If the accommodation is unfinished and power of fuel is supplied by the employer. And again, 18 can be if such accommodation is finished, meaning that there's a furniture, but power and fuel are not supplied by the employer, meaning that you pay your own water, you pay your own electricity. And the last one, it says, if the accommodation is fully furnished, there's furniture, and the water, electricity are paid by the employer, then our C will be 19. Then what is D? D is the number of months in a year of assessment during which an employee was entitled to occupy that accommodation. For example, let's say it's A, they say it's your remuneration proxy or your remuneration at the end of the year. B is 97,750 if an employee does not have control over the company or the accommodation. C, it says if the accommodation has at least 4 rooms, then C will be 17. However, the rate C can be 18 if the accommodation is unfinished, but water and electricity are being paid by the employer. And again, C can be when the accommodation is fully furnished. However, fuel or electricity and water are not paid by the employer, meaning that you are paying those services yourself as an employee. Then D is the number of months that you as an employee start to occupy that particular accommodation. Then this information will be given unto you. Let's see. Let's try to put this example and link it to our formula. It is residential accommodation cost paid by the employer. Mr. B is a plumber who conducts his business through a close corporation. Look at this. Let me just admit someone before I continue. Look at this. It's a Mr. Plum. Mr. Plum is a plumber at Plum CC. Can you see? It's a sole proprietor of which this particular individual has control over this residential accommodation. He owned the company, also owned the accommodation, residential accommodation. So Mr. Plum is the sole member of the closed corporation. Can you see? If you are a sole member, meaning that any decision that be made by you, you have got control over that company. For hiring and dismissing, you have control over that. So let's see. In terms of his employment contract, he is paid an annual salary of 100,000. Already we know our formula A is 100,000 because it's annual salary or a proxy, a remuneration proxy. And his family have the use of a 10-room house, which is owned by Plum CC. Can you see? He is the owner, he is the director, and the accommodation is owned by the company. Plum CC bought the house for R1,000,000 and raised a bond of 700,000. Their house is finished and Plum CC pays all the insurance, rates, electricity, and water. Can you see? Already, I can complete my formula. A minus B times C over 100 multiplied by D over 12. D already, I know A is 100,000. B, because look at B. B is nil. Why? Because Mr. Plum has control over this particular property. And C will be 19. Why 19? Is because the company or the house is finished and the company pays everything. Then what is D? D would be 12 over 12 because the house was used for a full year. Look at this. The formula is A minus B times C over 100 multiplied by D over 12. We said A represents salary, annual salary or remuneration. Already it is in the scenario. We've got this. We have got this, guys. Look at B. B's name. Why is name? It's because Mr. Plum is a controlling shareholder of a private company. Then what D? Look at D. We said it's 19. Why? Because the house is furnished, it's full of furniture, and fuel and water and electricity and whatever expenditure are paid by the company. That's why our C is 90. This is our rate. And look at our D. When did Mr. Plum occupy this accommodation? Meaning that it was occupied on the 1st of March until the end of the year. Can you see, guys? And this scenario, it tells you if the employer pays those expenditure, meaning that this expenditure will be claimed by the company, not an employee, then how much must be included as a fringe benefit in the hands of Mr. Plum? It's 19,000 because it would be 100,000 minus nil multiplied by 19 over 100 multiplied by 12 over 12. Guys, before we continue, do you understand this particular calculation? Yes, there's in a hand. Who are you? It's Desiree. Desiree, let me just unmute you. Desiree, hello, Mike. Yes, you can mute yourself. Unmute yourself, Desiree or Desire. Desiree, please unmute yourself. You can do that on your side. I've already allowed that to unmute yourself. Okay, if it says still disabled, so please post a question in the chat or which slide you don't understand so that I can go and clarify again. Because on my side, I've allowed the mic. You need to unmute on your side because if I say disable, let me see. Can you say I've disabled, but I want to unmute it, I've allowed the mic. Yes, put a question, Desiree. I'll go back, Desiree. In the meantime, just please type your question in the chat box. Then I'll come back to the chat box. Then the next example, it says residential accommodation fringe benefit. Mr. B is an employee of ZPT Ltd. He and his family are provided with a furnished residential accommodation. Look at this, furnished. The furniture is there. And during the year of assessment, the company incurred the following costs in respect of the house. Then we are told bond, rates, electricity, and water. Then let's see how to calculate this particular calculations. We are told Mr. B's remuneration is 120,000. It's what you are going to get in the test or exam. This information you'll be getting. Then it says Mr. B does not have an interest in the house and it's not a controlling shareholder in ZPTY. Can you see? It's just an ordinary employee in that company. Then let's calculate the tax effects or the value of the fringe benefit that must be included in Mr. B's gross income. Look at this. Mr. B, A minus B times C over 100 multiplied by D over 12. 120,000 is the A. B, can you see the difference now? Because Mr. B does not have majority shareholding in that company, does not control the company. That's why we use 95,750. The same scenario applies. Therefore, the amount that must be included is 4680. Then what about those expenses that have been paid by the employer? Then the employer will claim those expenditures. Can you see? Section 11A. They'll be claimed by the employer because he is the one who paid those particular expenditure. Another example, Mr. B again, in this case, is a controlling shareholder. The same scenario applies, but this example is controlling. That's why our B is nil, because he is controlling. So it will be 120,000 minus 0 multiplied by 19 over 100 multiplied by 12 over 12. Therefore, this is the amount that must be included. So the reason why we don't give him benefit of that 97,750 is because he does control the company. That's the reason why. Can you see this reason why our B is nil? It says because Mr. B is a controlling shareholder of the company, that's why B is nil. Let me just go and look at the chart. Say, please try to enable again. I'm starting to unmute. I'm saying if you can't, please put it in the chat box. It says, when we look at the years, should we look at the tax year of February year end? Of course, this is individual. It is individual, and we know the financial year of individuals, it starts from the 1st of March until the 28th of February, another following year. That's the financial year. Yes, we need to look there. And it doesn't change, guys. The financial year of individual does not change. It's not like companies. It's from the 1st of March until the 28th of February. Desiree, are we together? Are we together, Desiree? And Destiny saying again, should we expect scenarios of less than 4 rooms? No, 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 no. It can be more than 4 rooms. It can be 6, 7, 8. What you need to look at is if the accommodation is furnished or unfurnished. And again, if the employer is responsible for paying those expenditures, the water and electricity. Then let's see. Let's look at the low interest loan and subsidies. I know some years ago, most of the government employees, they used to have housing subsidies. Or again, the employees who are working at the financial institution, most of them, they receive the low interest on their loan that they are applying for. For example, we need to identify what is a low interest loan and a subsidy. And this is an explanation to say a low interest loan is where a loan has been granted to an employee by his employer or other person by arrangement with the employer or any associated institution in relation to the employer. Then what you need to do, the value of the fringe benefit is interest at the official interest rate. I'll explain this. Less interest incurred by the employee. For example, guys, this is Mr. Marcella. I'm applying or a loan to my employee, yeah, of which is UJ. Then you just said because I've I've got this employee-employee relationship and it's a fringe benefit. For UJ to give me that loan at the official interest rate, because we know now the official is 11.25%. So then if the employer gives me at less than the official, then that will be a fringe benefit because I'm not paying the whole interest rate on this particular loan. Then it will be the interest at official rate, then meaning that it will be, let me just type it. I've requested 100,000 at 10.5% is what the employer is giving me. However, the official interest rate in South Africa right now is 11.25%. Can you see? I'm not paying 100,000 at 11.25%. However, I'm paying 100,000 at 10.5%, of which the employer is giving me. Then the difference between 11.25 and 10.5, of which is 1.20, is a fringe benefit because I'm not paying at the official interest rate, meaning that it will be 11.5% minus 10.5. The difference will be a benefit in my hand as an employee. However, there are some exemptions. Let's see those exemptions. It says casual loan or short-term loans to an employee if not exceeding 3,000. For example, I can ask a loan for 2,500 as long as it does not exceed 3,000. Then it cannot be regarded as a low interest loan or a subsidy because it's for a short-term basis. And again, if it's a loan to an employee to enable him to further his studies, it cannot be a fringe benefit because you know that when you apply for a loan to further your studies, there are some agreement, a contract to say, when you finish your studies, come back and work for us. And because you are coming and work for them, it's not a fringe benefit. In other terms, meaning that you are repaying that loan for you being working for them. Can you see? It's a repayment, but not in the form of cash, but you are working for them. Let's see. A subsidy. It says where the employer pays a lender a subsidy in respect of capital or interest on any loan. Employer pays a lender a subsidy in respect of a loan to an employee, meaning that if amount paid by the employer plus interest paid by the employee, if it exceeds amount as determined by official interest rate, then it's a taxable subsidy, meaning that the full amount paid by the employer is a fringe benefit. That's why I'm always saying the portion of the amount that is being paid by the employer, it represents a fringe benefit and in an employee's hands. You will see when we do an example. Let's see a low interest loan. It says if amount paid by the employer plus interest paid by the employee is less than or equal to amount as determined by official interest rate, that is a low interest loan. Let's see, because they are saying if it is a subsidy, meaning that the amount paid by the employer plus interest, if it does exceed the official interest rate, therefore it's a subsidy. Look at this. This is an employee for this period applied a loan of 100,000. Look at the bond rate. The bond rate is the rate at which the financial institution gives you when you apply the loan of 100,000. They are saying we can give you 100,000 at a rate of 12%, meaning that the repayable amount, the monthly, it includes that 12%. Then the employer, the official rate of interest in this case is 7%. This is an example for you to identify whether this is a subsidy or a low interest loan. Then look at this. You have applied, Mr. Marcellus has applied for 100,000, and the bank says no at 12%. But the employer say, no, hang on. Instead of you, Mr. Marcella, pay 12%, you will pay 6%, meaning that the employer will pay another 6% to make it 12%, isn't it? Then when you take the amount paid by the employer and the amount paid by the employee, it is more than the official. 6% plus 6% is more than the official. That's why it says it's a subsidy, because it does exceed. Look at this, guys. It says if amount paid by the employer plus interest paid by the employee exceeds amount as determined by official interest rate, then it's a taxable subsidy. Then we are linking that with this example. The bond rate is 12%. Is what they are offering when I apply 100,000 loan. And at that point in time, the official rate is 7%, meaning that whatever the employer is paying plus what the employee is paying, can you see 6 plus 6 is 12, of which it does exceed the official interest rate. Therefore, it's a subsidy. Why is it a subsidy? Because 6 plus 6, it does exceed the official rate of 7%. Because the amount is 100,000 at a 12% interest rate. But as an employee, the employer said, no, you cannot pay the full amount. You only pay 6%, meaning that there's another 6% will be paid by the employer. Then the portion that is being paid by the employer represents a fringe benefit. Look at this. From the 1st of March until the 31st of August, it's 184 days divided by 365, because it's for that period. So the amount that must be included is 3,025 francs. And the same happens on the 1st of September until the end of the year. The bond rate is 7%. Can you see the difference now? And the official rate is 7%. Look at this. The employer is saying, because they gave you 7%, I'm going to pay 1% as an employee, but the employer will still pay 6% for this same example. So meaning that because the 7% official is equal to 6% that is being paid by the employer and 1% that is being paid by the employee, can you see? It's equal to. That's why it's a low interest loan, because it says if an amount paid by the employer plus interest paid by the employee is less than or equal to the amount determined by the official interest rate, then it's a low interest loan. Therefore, this is a low interest loan because the bond rate is 7%, the official rate is 7%. However, the employer is paying 6%, meaning that I'm going to pay 1%, of which 1% plus 6% is equal to the official interest rate, meaning that it's a low interest loan. Then in this case, the amount is 496 for the period 1 September to February 28 February. Then the total amount that must be included in an employee for this year would be 3,521. Let me see the chart. Thank you, sir. I now get it. Yes, guys, please let's see this example. Please, please, slide 26. Let's try to understand the theoretical part, because they are saying a subsidy is when an amount paid by the employer plus interest paid by the employee exceed, meaning that it does is higher than the official interest rate. Then I give this an example. The interest rate is 7%, but whatever the employee is paying 6% and the employer is paying 6% is 12%, and it does exceed the official interest rate. Therefore, it's a subsidy, because at the end, whatever I pay, an employer paid, it must equal to what the bank has charged me on my loan. The bank has charged me 12%, and the official rate is 7%. But the employer say, no, we are giving you as a fringe benefit, meaning that I, the employer, will pay 6%, and you will pay 6%, Mr. Marcel. Then when you add 6% plus 6% is 12%, of which is higher than the official interest rate. Therefore, it's a subsidy. However, if it's a low interest loan, can you see whatever the employer is paying, of which is 6% from above, and 1%, 1% plus 6% is equal to official interest rate. Therefore, it's a low interest loan. Any questions, guys? Any questions, guys? Okay, while we are still thinking about it, we'll come back to it. Then, let's see the contribution to medical aid scheme. And we said a fringe benefit arises when an employer pays the full amount or less than actual amount. That will be a fringe benefit. In this case, the employer pays everything to the employee, meaning that the amount that is being paid by the employer towards employee's medical scheme or aid is a fringe benefit. Look at this example. Mr. Good is married and has one child, age 16. Mr. Good is employed by Big P2 Ltd and is a member of the Good Health Medical Scheme. Look at this. The monthly contribution that is being paid by the company is 2,000 on behalf of Mr. Good. And again, on behalf of Mr. Average, the company pays 800, meaning that they don't pay anything. That's why it says the employees make no contribution to the scheme, meaning that the amount that is being paid by the employer is considered as fringe benefit. I said fringe benefit arises where the employer pays nothing or pay certain portion. In this case, the employer pays everything on behalf of Mr. Good for the whole year. Therefore, this is the value of the fringe benefit that must be included in Mr. Good's gross income. And again, in terms of Mr. Average, again, the employer paid 800 rands for 12 months, meaning that the whole 9.6 must be included in gross income of Mr. Average. That constitutes a fringe benefit. These are the codes. Most of the time, they are being used when you fill the income tax return of individuals. And it's good because it tells you this code represents what amount. This code presents this amount, which is good for those who will be starting working next year. You will see this code and you will familiarize with this code. Automatically, you will learn this code. You know, under 361, 361 is a salary, it's taxable. The annual payment is taxable. Can you see payment on employees' debt? This is a fringe benefit because a payment has been made by the employer on behalf of an employee. That constitutes a fringe benefit. 3808. Travel allowance, yes. 3701. Subsistence allowance, other allowance, low interest loan, the accommodation. Can you see? That speaks well with the code as per SARS. Let's see if there's any questions in the chat. What time do we have, guys, left so that I can go to another slide, those slides that, guys, you had issues with? We still have about 18 minutes. Guys, can you allow me to start the first slide until slide 9? Because it's where my slides were not moving. Can you give me that chance, guys, to go back? If it is okay with you guys. Can you put that in the chat, guys? You allow me to start on slide 1 until slide 9 to cover up. Guys, talk to me. Yes, let me just do that. Anna Marie, let me just do that. Oh, there's a hand. Oh, okay. Oh, yes, let me just start, guys. Yes, I will do that with a big smile. Yes, let's start, guys. I said this is part B of the fringe benefit, of which we are going to learn about the acquisition of assets at less than actual value, of which we have touched on it last week when we are doing travel allowance. That was the last part of the slide. And what does it mean? Meaning that, and I'm still going to give the same example so that you can understand. If there's an acquisition of asset less than actual value, let me say, for example, I'm working at Maponya VW. Then when I purchase a car, the value of the car is 200,000. I can get that car less than 200,000. I can get it 190,000 or 195. Then the difference between 200,000 and 195, of which is 5,000, that is a fringe benefit. And again, I gave an example with Edgar's. If you're an employee, then whatever you buy as an employee, you'll get less than the actual value. Then that actual value, the less amount, you compare the 100 rands, the value of the clothes or the trouser, less what you have paid for as an employee. Let's say you've paid 95 rands, then 5 rand, the difference is a fringe benefit because you didn't pay for the full amount of 100 rands. We are together on that one. Then the second slide, we spoke about the right of use of an asset. It says other than residential accommodation or any motor vehicle. Let's say a company leased an accommodation on behalf of its employees. For example, let's look at the mining companies and the construction businesses, whereby most of the employees are staying far from the mining business and far from the construction business. The employer can lease or rent accommodation close by the business. And the employer will say, because I've rented on your behalf, then I'm going to be accountable to pay the third party. Then the agreement will be, if they will be that agreement, whether the employer will pay 70% of the rental amount and the employer pay 30%, the difference between 70 and 30, that will be a fringe benefit in the hands of the employee. For example, let me just give you an example. Let's say the year the rent paid by the employer is 500,000. No, it's too much. Let's say 50,000. Then in that 50,000, the employer will say, the employer, because I've rented out on your behalf, maybe you can pay, let's say 25,000 or 10,000. It will depend on the agreement, meaning that 25,000 will be included. This amount will be included in the hands of an employee as a fringe benefit. It depends on the agreement, guys. It can be 50,000 and the employer pays 5,000. The employee pays 5,000. then meaning that 45,000 will be a fringe benefit because the employee does not pay the full 50,000 but pay portion. Then we are saying whatever the employer is paying on behalf of an employee, that form part of fringe benefit. And again, they say if the asset is owned by the employer, then we know most the employer will be entitled to claim a depreciation. In this case, it says it will be 15% based on the per annum times law of the market value. Whatever the employer has claimed, you must minus the amount paid by the employee. Whatever amount is being paid by the employee must be deducted. Then again, the right of use of motor vehicle for private purposes. Guys, if you see the, the, the right of use, meaning that the company owned the vehicle and the vehicle is for business purposes, but once it becomes private purposes, meaning that that private purposes is a fringe benefit in the hands of the employee because the car was only acquired for business purposes. But if you use for private, meaning that the employer is aware of that during weekend you use those car for your personal, you know, enjoyment, then it is a benefit because that car was not meant for private, it is for business. Then if you've got that vehicle, it says you take the value of the car on a monthly basis multiply by 3.5%. Why 3.5? Meaning that the car does not have a maintenance plan and the value of the vehicle is cost include VAT but excluding finance charges, the same as travel allowance. And on top of that, it says the 15% that we have talked about in the previous slide, it must be applied on a 12-month period. It must be a completed year or 12 months period for you to apply that depreciation because it says 15% per annum for each completed period of 12 months. Let's say that car was used for or the accommodation because the car is most the useful life. If it is for a full year in 2020, it will be multiplied by 15%. 2021, 15%, 2022, until the car is finished. No more depreciation because it is finished or is sold. Then it's what we have explained in the previous slide to say 3.5 multiplied by the determined value of the vehicle. And the thing that you must take cognizance of, it says if the vehicle given for part of a month with no maintenance plan, use the ratio of days used divided by the total days in the month. For example, if the car was only used for 10 days, 10 days in March, and we know that March has got 31 days in total, isn't it? But the car was only used 10 days in that March, is what it explained. Meaning that you are going to take the value of the vehicle, multiply by 10 divided by 31 because it's the total number of days in that particular month. Then if the car has maintenance plan, meaning that you are going to use 3.25, the difference is if the car does have maintenance plan, you use 3.25. But if the car does not have maintenance plans, you use 3.5%. Then it says you take the value of the fringe benefit, reduce with the amount that is being paid by the employee to the employer. You will see in the next slide. And remember what we have done in the previous week under travel allowance. It says if the car is being used by, if two cars are being used for business purposes, then you calculate the business kilometers for both cars. In this case, it says if more than one car, if an employee is given more than one vehicle and both the vehicles used for business purposes, then you only tax the one that has the highest value of private use. Then you will see in a scenario because you will be given the logbook for both cars and you compare the logbooks for these two cars. If the one that is it has the highest value of private, then you tax the one that has the highest private usage. But it says if one vehicle is given to a wife, then tax both. Why? Because a wife does not have an employee-employee relationships. Only the husband who's working for that company, not the wife. But if one car has been given to a wife to do her personal or private things, then the Act says tax both cars. Then let's see. It says, how do you do that if there is that scenario where the car is being used for private? It says you take the value of the fringe benefit multiplied by the ratio of business usage over the total number of kilometers, multiply by 3.5 because the car does not have maintenance plan, meaning that you are going to deduct this, the business usage, from the value of the fringe benefit. This is how it looks like. Look at this. They say you take the value of the fringe benefit, of which we are told that Mr. X uses a company car which costs 300,000. 24,000 kilometers traveled for the whole year, of which 11,000 is for business usage. And the car does not have maintenance plan. Look at this. It does not have maintenance plan, meaning that we are going to use 3.5% percentage. Yeah, 3.5, because the car does not have maintenance plan. Then the first step, the value of the car multiplied by 3.5% because the car does not have maintenance plan. And again, the car has been used for the whole year. It's 126,000. This is the value of the fringe benefit. Then you take the value of the fringe benefit, multiply by the business kilometers divided by the total number of kilometers traveled, multiply by this value. Can you see 57,000, of which we are going to set off this business against the value of the fringe benefit. This is the amount that must be included in an employee or Mr. X's gross income. Then this slide, it talks about business use percentage reduction, meaning that whatever the employer pays as a business expenditure or private expenses on behalf of the car that is owned by the employer, it must be claimed by the employee, because the employee is the one that pays that expenditure. Look at this. It says when the employer pays some or all of the cost, then claim the reduction in fringe benefit, meaning that you claim that deduction against fringe benefit. However, the employer must keep the accurate records of distance traveled for business purposes. Then, how to calculate that? You take the business private kilometers multiplied by divided by the cost multiplied by the total kilometers, of which this amount reduces the value of the fringe benefit. And again, I will show in the form of an example. We are still on the matters of which an employee pays either the fuel cost, either the insurance, either the maintenance. It says reduce the fringe benefit with that rate. That is what we are going to do. This I've explained. What is pool cars? These are excluded. This does not form part of fringe benefit, because pool cars, those are cars that are available to be used by employees in that particular company or institution. They are not given to a specific individual. Everybody within the company can use those cars as long as it's for business purposes. And we know by now that travel between place of residence and a place of work is regarded as private. That does not form part of fringe benefit. And again, required to use vehicle outside normal hours of work, and private use is infrequent, meaning that, let's say it's doctors and it's policemen, they are taking the car every day at home. Then, in case of emergencies, they can use that car. That's why they say private use is infrequent. I'm telling you, for you to take the car to you buy grocery and or to take your kids to school, it's rare, because that is not used for private. It's for business, however, outside normal hours. The doctors, if they are called for emergencies, they can use that car quickly to go to hospital to go and conduct those surgeries. Let's now see the example that links where an employee bears full fuel cost. This is the value of the vehicle, 400,000, and says it's not subject to maintenance plan, meaning that we are going to use 3.5%. And the car was used for the whole year. The kilometers were given. However, the 20,000 are for private, and Mr. X paid the fuel of 26,000. Look at this. The monthly value of the fringe benefit, 400 times 3.5%, of which is 14,000. We then annualize this. The annual value would be 14,000 multiplied by 12, of which is 168,000. And they say you are taking this value of the fringe benefit. You take this, you multiply by the ratio of business use over the total number of kilometers traveled, of which it gives you 56,000. Because an employee pays the fuel. Look at this. It says his logbook showed that 20,000 were used for private use, and Mr. X paid fuel relating to his private use. Then we're taking less fuel cost reduction because it's a business use percentage reduction. We are reducing the value of the fringe benefit by what the employee has paid as an expenditure. 20,000 private multiplied by 197.9 cents. How do we get this amount? It is based on the value of the vehicle, the table below. Can you say the travel allowance? We know that the value is 400,000 and the fuel cost is 197.9 cents. Then we are still going to reduce the value of the fringe benefit by the fuel cost reduction, and the value of that must be included is 72,420,000 rands, not 1,100, 420 rands. Guys, is it clear now? Because we are running out of time now. It's 2 minutes to 5. Then, guys, if it is not clear, please make sure you contact me via my email. Or again, please bring those questions on Wednesday and Thursday. You guys, you don't come to class. I don't know why. Please come to class so that we can unpack any uncertainties that you have. And I do apologize, guys, for this, disturbance, confusion, because some they didn't see the slides, some they saw the slides, and you know what? Even myself, I didn't feel okay about it. Therefore, I need to apologize, guys, for that, what happens in our session. Guys, if there's no questions, thanks for your patience. And I really, really thank you for your questions and for you being patient with me. Thanks a lot and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you, guys.